The convoy lights cut through the dust like thin blades of cold fire, hovering just above the broken surface of Virley Station's lower ring. Cale was not supposed to be anywhere near royalty, political figures, or anything that required ceremonial protocol and clean boots. He was supposed to be inside the maintenance crawlspace 3 decks up, arguing with a stubborn fusion relay that kept resetting itself like it had developed a personality disorder. Instead, he was hanging upside down from a service gantry, one boot hooked into a cable rail, a diagnostic scanner clenched between his teeth, and watching an Imperial escort formation glide past like a procession of silent predators pretending to be decorative lights. "Don't look expensive," he muttered around the scanner. "Don't look important, don't." The lead craft unfolded its shielding array, and the entire corridor below shimmered with layered gravity fields. Cale sighed so hard it almost dislodged him from the rail. "Of course it looks important." That was when the first distortion hit. It wasn't loud at first, nothing dramatic. Just a subtle folding in the air like space briefly forgot how to behave. The escort ships flickered, the lights stuttered, and then the station's internal sensors screamed so loudly Cale actually dropped the scanner. "Ah, that's not a maintenance issue," he said to no one in particular. A split second later, something tore through the convoy. The first explosion wasn't fire, it was silence collapsing inward. One of the escort drones folded in on itself like paper, remembering it was never supposed to exist. Then came the second strike, a jagged lance of energy that missed the central craft by meters and carved a glowing scar through the corridor wall. People started screaming over comm channels. Security drones snapped awake like angry insects. Cale saw the target instantly. The central vessel, sleek and almost deliberately unarmed looking, carrying something or someone very valuable. "Yeah, that's definitely a royal situation," he said. The third strike came straight for it. Cale didn't think. That was important. Later, people would ask him what kind of strategy or courage he used. The honest answer was always going to be none. It was reflex, the kind of reflex that gets engineers fired or dead. He dropped, from the gantry, from the cables, straight into open air. The world tilted violently as he fell past the convoy's shield lattice. His body hit the outer hull of the royal craft with enough force to make his ribs complain in languages he didn't know they spoke. "Please don't explode," he told the ship. "I just got my certification renewed." He slammed his palm onto an emergency access seam and forced it open mid-flight. The hatch resisted for half a second, then gave up with the resigned sigh of machinery that knew it was not paid enough to argue. He tumbled inside. Inside, everything was too clean, too soft. The lighting adjusted to his presence like it was mildly offended he hadn't been pre-approved. And there she was, the alien princess, Lyra. At first glance she looked human, that was the unsettling part. Human enough that your brain tried to relax. Then it noticed the ears, long, elegantly curved, extending upward and slightly backward like living antennae tuned to emotions instead of sound. Their edges shimmered faintly, reacting to every flicker of light and movement around her. Her expression was calm in a way that suggested she had never once been personally inconvenienced by physics. She turned toward him and blinked. Cale, still mid-collision with the floor, waved weakly. "Hi, slightly unplanned entrance, don't panic." "I am not panicking," she said. Her voice carried a double resonance like it had been translated twice and still kept its dignity intact. "That's good," Cale said, "because there's currently an assassination attempt happening outside and I'd hate to be the emotional trigger for a panic spiral." The ship jolted. Something outside screamed through the hull plating. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her ears shifted, catching invisible currents. "That sound indicates hostile intent." "Correct," Cale said. "Gold star for observation." Another impact rocked the vessel. A panel behind Cale burst outward in a spray of molten alloy. He barely had time to swear before the force threw him sideways. Instinctively, he moved again. He didn't protect her because it made sense. He did it because she was the only other upright thing in the room, and collapsing alone felt worse. He shoved her down behind a reinforced console as another strike hit. The console absorbed most of it, but not all. A shard of energized debris sliced through Cale's side like a bad decision made visible. He made a sound that was half laugh, half regret. Okay, that one is going in the do not recommend category. Lyra grabbed him before he fully hit the floor. Her touch was surprisingly steady, her expression less so. You are injured, she said. Observant, Kale replied through clenched teeth. Are all royal families this good at stating the obvious, or is that a special talent? Another explosion outside. The ship lurched again. Kale tried to sit up, failed, tried again, failed more dramatically. I need you to move, he said. Preferably in a direction away from exploding things. You are still here, Lyra said. Yeah, Kale said. That tends to happen when you bleed inside important vehicles. Her ears twitched, not just reacting now, reading. You interfered with the trajectory of the attack. Not on purpose, Kale said. My body just really hates paperwork explaining royal fatalities. For the first time, something like confusion crossed her face. Outside, the attackers adjusted. The ship's defenses began to wake, but too slowly, too elegantly. Whoever designed them clearly assumed people would wait politely before attempting murder. Kale pushed himself up again, wobbling. Okay. New plan, we survive this, then I get very angry at whoever designed your security protocols. That is not a standard diplomatic response, Lyra said. I'm not a diplomat, Kale said. I fix things until they stop trying to kill me. Another strike hit, closer this time. The hull groaned. He glanced at her. She was still watching him, ears angled slightly forward now, not fear, something else. Something more dangerous in its own way, curiosity. Princess, Kale said, do you have a panic button? I am not designed for panic, she replied. That's honestly concerning. The ship's interior lights flickered red. Kale exhaled, wiped blood from his side with a shaking hand and sighed. All right, fine, we improvise. He grabbed a loose access panel, ripped it open, and started rerouting power with the kind of reckless confidence that only comes from not expecting to live long enough to be wrong. Lyra watched him. You are altering the ship's defensive logic. Yes, without authorization. Yes, that is illegal. Kale paused. In my defense, I am currently being stabbed by space politics, so I think we're past legal frameworks. A beat, then very quietly Lyra said, that is statistically reasonable. He almost laughed, it hurt. Outside, the attackers made one final push. Kale slammed the panel shut. Hold on, he said, this part might get loud. Lyra stepped closer instead, her ears angled toward him. Why, she asked, did you act? Kale blinked. That is your question right now? Yes. He glanced at the ruptured hull, the incoming fire, the failing systems, then back at her. Because, he said, dying on your shift is bad for morale. A pause, then she did something unexpected. She smiled, not fully, not easily, but enough that the ship's ambient systems registered a shift in emotional resonance and briefly recalibrated lighting in confusion. Outside, the next wave of fire hit. Kale braced, and the ship answered back. He woke up to the sensation of being very politely reconstructed. That was the only way Kale could describe it at first. There was no sharp pain, no dramatic return of consciousness, no heroic gasp. Just the slow realization that his body was being argued back into existence by machines that clearly disapproved of his earlier decisions. A soft field of light held him in place, not restraining so much as negotiating with gravity on his behalf. Every breath felt filtered through something that had read medical textbooks and decided human lungs were unnecessarily chaotic. You are awake, a voice said. Kale blinked. Unfortunately, yes. He tried to sit up. The field gently disagreed. Okay, he said. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but I am not a museum exhibit. You are in recovery stabilization, the voice replied. Same thing, different branding. His vision cleared slowly like a system booting after a catastrophic error. The room around him was not a room in any human sense. It was more like someone had designed architecture using equations instead of materials, then asked those equations to feel emotionally soothing. And standing nearby was Lyra. Her long ears shifted slightly when she noticed him fully awake. The faint luminescence along their edges pulsed once, as if confirming he still qualified as alive and irritating. You remained conscious for an extended period during trauma exposure, she said. Kale frowned. Is that your way of saying I was dramatic? It is my way of saying your biology is inefficient. That's fair. A pause, then Kale added, but also I survived, so technically I win. Lyra tilted her head. Win what? I don't know, he said. Life, the universe, basic avoidance of being exploded. That earned another ear flick. He was starting to realize her ears were more expressive than half the people he'd worked with. The stabilization field finally loosened just enough for him to sit up. Pain immediately reminded him it still existed, but it was the kind of pain that had been told to behave by advanced medicine and was now sulking in a corner. Your ship's doctors are very judgmental, Kale said. They are not doctors, Lyra replied. They are automated corrective intelligences. Even worse, I've been judged by AI before. It feels personal. The air shifted slightly. Not a sound, more like a pressure change in reality itself. Kale turned just in time to see a diagnostic drone hover closer, scanning him with slow, deliberate pulses of light. Is that thing checking if I'm still structurally valid? He asked. Yes, tell it I'm emotionally questionable but structurally functional. The drone paused, then emitted a tone that sounded suspiciously like disappointment. Kale pointed at it. See, that's judgment. Lyra stepped closer to the drone. He is stable enough for communication. I wouldn't go that far, Kale said. I'm more like conversationally fragile. The drone drifted away, apparently satisfied. Silence settled between them for a moment, though even silence on this ship felt engineered. Kale looked down at his side. The wound was gone, replaced by faint geometric stitching patterns under his skin that glowed softly when he moved. I feel like I've been updated, he said. You were repaired, Lyra said. Same thing, different existential implications. She studied him again, longer this time, her ears angled slightly forward, picking up emotional signals he didn't fully understand. You interfered with a royal convoy under direct assault, she said. Kale nodded. Still feels like a poor career choice, yes. Why, he sighed, because I was there. That is not a strategic reason. Most of my decisions aren't. She accepted that in silence, which was unsettlingly polite. A small pause passed before she added, the attackers were not meant to succeed. Kale blinked. That sounds like a problem you should have mentioned earlier. They were a controlled variable. That's worse. Her ears twitched again. Explain. He gestured vaguely. In my experience, controlled variables are what people say right before everything goes wrong in a very expensive way. A soft hum moved through the ship like it was listening to the conversation and quietly taking notes. Lyra walked a slow circle around him, not threatening, more like observation, study, curiosity that hadn't yet learned restraint. You acted without command structure, she said. Correct. You prioritized my survival over your own. Kale shrugged. That's a generous interpretation. I mostly prioritized not watching someone get stabbed in front of me while I was already there. That is still prioritization. Congratulations, I am now a philosopher. She stopped. Humor is a common human response to fear, she said. Kale pointed at her. See, now you're doing it, you're diagnosing me. That's like humor, but colder. A faint shift crossed her expression, not confusion this time, something closer to interest, being slightly offended that it had been noticed. You are not behaving like expected human subjects, she said. That's my whole brand, Kale replied. The stabilization field finally disengaged completely. He swung his legs off the platform, immediately regretting the enthusiasm but staying upright. The ship adjusted lighting to match his movement as if trying to support him emotionally through illumination. That is unnecessary, Kale said to the room. No response. Yeah, I thought so. Lyra stepped closer again, slower this time. You are under review, she said. Kale sighed. Of course I am. That's the most consistent thing about my life. I break something, survive it, and then get reviewed by higher authorities. You are not in custody, she added. That's what people in custody say right before paperwork appears. A faint, almost smile again touched her face. You are unusual, she said. I've been called worse, Kale said, usually by machinery. There was a pause that felt less like silence and more like the ship itself leaning in. Then Lyra said, my father will arrive. Kale froze. You're what? Warlord Consul Theron. Kale slowly sat back down, purely out of respect for his own nervous system. Okay, that sounds like a title designed to make people reconsider their life choices. He will assess your actions. Great, love assessments, big fan. Especially when I'm unconscious for them. Her ears tilted slightly backward now, a subtle shift, not emotional expression he fully understood but close enough to concern that it made him uneasy. "You expect punishment," she said. Kale looked at her. "I expect him to ask why a random maintenance worker is leaking blood on his daughter's security crisis." A pause, then carefully Lyra said, "You are not random." "That feels like the start of something I don't want to finish," Kale said. Before she could respond, the ship changed tone. Not lighting, not sound. Tone, like the entire structure had recognized something arriving before it physically did. Kale felt it in his teeth. "Okay," he said slowly, "tell me that's not your father already judging me from orbit." Lyra's ears lifted. "He is here." The arrival didn't look like arrival at first. Space outside the ship simply corrected itself. Kale felt it through the deck plating before anything visual changed, like the universe had briefly paused to check its posture. The ship's systems went quiet in a way that felt less like silence and more like respectful hesitation. Then the warship appeared. Not by jumping, not by folding space dramatically like human science fiction always assumed. It simply resolved into existence as if it had been there the entire time and reality had just agreed to stop ignoring it. Kale stared at the viewport. "Okay," he said quietly. "That's either your father or I have finally lost enough blood to start hallucinating government paperwork." Lyra stood beside him. Her long ears were angled forward, completely still now. For the first time, Kale noticed that when she stopped moving them, the entire room felt slightly less expressive. "That is his vessel," she said. "Of course it is," Kale replied. "It couldn't just be a polite shuttle. It had to be emotionally intimidating." A pause, then Kale added, "Does it at least come with warnings, like may cause existential reevaluation?" No answer came from her, but that might have been because the warship was now opening. It didn't open like doors. It unfolded like a thought becoming too large to stay inside a mind. Light spilled through structured corridors and something descended. Kale had expected armor, weapons, something aggressively ceremonial. Instead, the figure that stepped into the ship's docking corridor looked almost calm. Not soft, not gentle, controlled in the way storms are controlled only by geography. Warlord Consul Theron. He stopped at the threshold between ships and looked at Kale. That was it at first. No speech, no announcement, just observation. Kale shifted slightly. "Hi," he said. "So, funny story," Lyra interrupted immediately. "He is the human who intervened." Kale turned his head slightly. "Thank you, I was going to say that, but with more panic." Theron stepped forward. Each step made Kale aware of how much the ship was suddenly less certain about its own structural authority. Even the lighting seemed to dim slightly, as if reconsidering its confidence. Theron finally spoke. "This is the variable." Kale blinked. "I'm sorry, I prefer person, but I'll accept variable if there's benefits attached. Like discounts or reduced existential taxes." Silence. Lyra made a sound that might have been laughter if it had ever learned how. Theron didn't react to the joke. Instead, he walked closer, circling Kale slowly, not threatening. "Evaluating? You disrupted an assassination protocol that had been in controlled motion," Theron said. Kale nodded carefully. "I did notice it was very organized. That was part of the problem. You should not have survived the entry wound." "Yeah," Kale said. "I keep hearing that from medical systems. They're not fans of my persistence." Theron stopped. "You protected my daughter." Kale glanced at Lyra, then back at him. "Protected is a strong word. I mostly just got in the way and refused to stop bleeding." "That is still protection," Theron said. Kale hesitated. "In my defense, I did not file paperwork for it." That earned the smallest shift in Theron's expression, not a smile, but something like a calculation acknowledging an unexpected result. Lyra stepped slightly closer to her father. "This was not the original outcome," she said. "No," Theron replied. "It was not." Kale frowned. "I'm starting to feel like I walked into a meeting I wasn't invited to and somehow I'm the agenda." Theron turned back to him. "You believe this was an attack?" Kale shrugged carefully. "There were explosions, usually a clue." "It was a test." Kale froze. "Ah," he said slowly, "that's worse. I prefer random violence, at least it's honest." Lyra looked at him. "You are not offended." "I'm tired," Kale said. "Offense requires energy." Theron's voice remained steady. We needed to confirm whether human-aligned systems still respond to Imperial lineage threats. Kale stared. So, you used your daughter as bait? Lyra did not react outwardly. Her ears remained steady, but Kale now understood that didn't mean anything was calm. It meant something was being processed too deeply to show. Theron replied, "We used probability." Kale rubbed his face. "That is the coldest sentence I've ever heard." A pause, then Kale pointed slightly at Lyra. "Just checking she knows she's a probability, right? Because she's standing right here." Lyra said, "I was aware." "That was not comforting," Kale muttered. Theron studied him again. "You are inefficient." "Consistently," Kale agreed. "You are unpredictable. Also accurate. You are alive." Kale raised a finger. "That one I worked very hard on." Silence stretched, then Theron turned slightly, addressing both of them. "The assassination attempt failed because you intervened." Kale nodded. "Still not my favorite achievement, but I'll take it." "It confirms something," Theron continued. Kale sighed. "I have a bad feeling about what it confirms." Lyra spoke softly. "It confirms that humans still act without strategic alignment." Kale pointed at her. "That sounded nicer in your head, didn't it?" She ignored him. Theron continued. "It also confirms that our old alliance protocols are still viable." Kale blinked. "Alliance?" That word landed differently. Lyra looked at him now with something more deliberate. "Yes," she said, "between species." Kale laughed once, short, disbelieving. "I'm sorry, I think you've confused me with someone who owns a diplomatic license or at least a tie." Theron stepped closer. "You prevented a political collapse," he said, "without instruction. Without authorization, without benefit." Kale shrugged. "That's kind of my specialty, unlicensed disaster management." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "He is also emotionally reactive." Kale sighed. "You're really enjoying that diagnosis thing." Theron raised a hand. For the first time, Kale saw something like ceremony embedded in movement. Not threat, not judgment, recognition. "You will be recorded as an unclassified diplomatic intervention unit," Theron said. Kale blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Lyra translated calmly. "He is calling you a category of event." Kale stared at her. "That's not better." Theron continued. "You are not subject to punishment." Kale exhaled slowly. "That's the first good news I've had all week." "You are also not a guest," Theron added. Kale frowned. "Okay, that sounds like the opposite of good news." Lyra stepped slightly closer to Kale. "He is assigning you status outside normal hierarchy," she said. Kale looked between them. "Why does everything in your civilization sound like it requires a committee to interpret?" Theron paused, then unexpectedly, "Because it does." That almost broke Kale. He laughed, properly this time, exhausted, disbelieving, relieved. "Okay," Kale said, "that's actually the most honest thing I've heard since I arrived." Silence settled again, but different now, less tense. More recalibrated. Theron turned slightly. "Lyra, yes," she answered. "You will continue observation." Kale pointed. "Excuse me, observation of what exactly? I'm right here and I don't like the tone of that word." Lyra looked at him. "You are still statistically improbable," she said. "That is not reassuring." "It is interesting." Kale sighed. "That is worse." For the first time, Theron's voice carried something almost amused. "You will remain near her," he said. Kale froze. "Is that a request or a warning?" "Yes," Theron replied. Kale stared at him for a long moment, then he looked at Lyra. "You know," he said, "I was really hoping this story ended with me going back to fixing broken relays and avoiding politics." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "You are still allowed to repair relays." "That is not the part I was worried about." A pause, then quieter. Kale added, "So what now?" Theron turned toward the exit corridor of the ship. "Now," he said, "we observe what happens when an unplanned variable remains inside a controlled system." Kale muttered, "That sounds like the beginning of a very expensive mistake." Lyra stepped beside him as her father left. "You did not fail," she said. Kale looked at her. "I almost died 3 times. I call that at least a partial failure." "You changed the outcome of a war calculation," she said. Kale rubbed his face. "I really just wanted a quiet shift." "That is unlikely," she replied. He sighed. Then looked at her properly for the first time without a ship exploding in the background. "You're going to keep watching me, aren't you?" "Yes," she said. "Is that optional?" "No." Kale nodded slowly. Great. I've upgraded from maintenance worker to government curiosity. That feels like a promotion I didn't apply for. Her ears shifted slightly, a subtle motion he now recognized as amusement. That is close, she said. Kale exhaled, then leaned back against the wall. All right, he said, but I have one condition. Lyra looked at him. If I'm going to be part of some interstellar political experiment, he said, I get to complain about it loudly. She considered this. Agreed, she said. Kale nodded. Good, because I am extremely qualified in complaining. For the first time since everything began, the ship didn't feel like it was watching him as a problem. It felt like it was listening. And somewhere between a warlord